Boy, have you ever just asked God why? Now, if you haven't, then I will let you come up here because you're much more qualified than I am. I say that quite a bit. Why? I don't understand. Doesn't make sense. And, sometimes I just don't know what's going on. And things happen. And so, if you've read through the Bible, I know you have come across this verse in 2 Samuel. And if you have, I am certain that you've, at least the first time you read it, if not the 10th or the 20th, you said, "Really? That seems a little much, God." It is the story of Uzzah. How many of you know the story of Uzzah? You will in a moment. It's in 2 Samuel 6. And it says this. This is the puzzling verse. "And when they came to Nachon's threshing floor, Uzzah put out his hand to the ark of God, took hold of it, for the oxen stumbled. Then the anger of the Lord was aroused against Uzzah, and God struck him there for his error. And he died there by the ark of God." Now, I'm going to be honest with you. The first time that I read that, I remember reading this when I was in high school. And I was thinking, man, here's a guy trying to keep the ark from falling. And why would he do such a thing like that? And why would this man who tried to do something to save the ark put him to death? Now, we may have a lot of problems in our life, and we may ask the Lord, why this and why that? But if you think about it, at least like I've thought about it, just touching something and you die, I don't think any of us could say, "Whoa, I've had something happen to me that is worse than that." A lot of times we can say, "Well, we might have done this, maybe I didn't do this." We try to think of why this is happening to us, and we may can formulate some kind of reasoning, but here, what's going on? Well, Uzzah's act, trying to do what we think is right. Now, Uzzah attempted to save the ark. Now, we can see and we can judge that act based on what we see, or what David saw, or what the 30,000 men that David had with him saw. Because all of them witnessed this. But what we can't see that God can is what motivated Uzzah to put his hand up there. Now, let's see if I can get this to work. What motivated Uzzah to do that? Well, I'm going to tell you some things that I came up with that I know I could see me being motivated to do just that. The first thing is that impulsive, innocent reaction. The thing looks like it's tipping over. Whoop, oh, I'm going to stop that. Seems fair enough. Or it could be, looks like it's going to fall. I'm going to put my hand up there because everybody in here, the 30,000 men, could see that I kept the ark from falling off the cart. Have you ever done something like that? Boy, I need to do this because people need to see that I'm doing good works, that I'm trying. It could have been others will see my efforts. That's what we just talked about. But my opportunity to do good, let me go back to that, and help God. God, you needed me there for a moment to keep that ark from falling. Now, God is God. We are just lowly humans. Does God really need our help in accomplishing anything he needs to have done? Not at all. But we think he does. We do. I know I've thought it. God, I need to do this for you. God, I need to do that for you. I want to do this for you. And there's nothing wrong with that as long as you realize that it's God doing those things through you, not you initiating and accomplishing that. We just have to be willing. It could be just as simple as, I don't want that thing dropping on my toes. It could have been totally selfish. This thing's going to hurt me. I got to keep it from falling. You know what? If I don't keep this from falling, who's going to get the blame? I am. Boy, does that not happen to us? I got to do this. Not because I need to do it for the service of God to help my human being, but if I don't, I'm going to get blamed some way, shape, or form. This is my favorite one. I know the rules. I know the law. But surely if I just reach up there, I wonder if something will happen to me. I just test to see. Boy, we do that in our life a lot, don't we? Oh, I can do this one little thing. God's not going to care. I'm not feeling good today. I didn't get what I needed today, or this or that, whatever, but I'm just going to slide just a little bit. So I'll just reach up there and kind of push it back. God's not going to mind. Those are the things I come up with. You may come up with some more as well. But we don't know what Uzzah's motivation was, but God did. And it resulted in Uzzah's death. Now, the next verse tells us something. It says, then David became angry because of the Lord's outburst against Uzzah, and that place has been called Perez Uzzah to this day, which means the death of Uzzah, or the troubles of Uzzah. But again, it doesn't say why David was angry. He said he was angry with the Lord, but why was he angry? Was he angry because he's messing up a good celebration? We're going to read in just a minute. They were having a good time picking up the ark because it had been with the Philistines after a war that the Israelites lost. It had been with the Philistines for quite some time, and the Philistines sent it back. So, God, I'm kind of ticked. You messed up a good celebration here. We were having a good time. Maybe, and we don't know this, but I'm going to give you another option. Maybe the anger that David felt was against himself. That God took his anger out on Uzzah instead of me. But why would David think such a thing? He's the one that orchestrated this. He's the one that's bringing the ark back to the city of David, or not back to the city of David, back to the Israelites' place of worship, and bringing it into Jerusalem. So, here's what we know. It said again, David gathered all the choice men of Israel, 30,000. And David arose and went with all the people who were with him from Baal, Judah, to bring up from there the ark of God, whose name is called by the name, the Lord of hosts, who dwells between the cherubim. So they set the ark of God on a new cart and brought it out of the house of Abinadab, which was on the hill. And Uzzah and Ahio, the sons of Abinadab, drove the new cart. And they brought it out of the house of Abinadab, which was on the hill, accompanying the ark of God. And Ahio went before the ark. Then David and all the house of Israel played music before the Lord on all kinds of instruments of fir wood, on harps, on stringed instruments, on tambourines, on sistrums, and on cymbals. Can you imagine 30,000 plus people celebrating that the ark is back in their hands. And they're moving that ark right on down the road. Man, you know David was excited. And so were all the other people. And then boom, a man drops dead. That put an end to the party. But why? God gives us a lot of information in those first 5 verses of chapter 6 in Samuel that might give us a hint of what was really going on there. It says, so they set the ark of God on a new cart. So that means it must have been setting on an old cart, right? If they put it on a new cart, it was setting on something. It probably was setting on some type of a cart, because the Philistines, when they decided, we don't want this ark in our presence, it's causing us some problems, they stuck it on an ark with oxen, no driver, just sent it towards the Israelites. And away it went. And then it made its way up to close to where Abinadab was living. And they said, we've got to do something with the ark. I'm sure they notified David that it was there. It was probably there in Abinadab's house for a few days. And, because they didn't want to touch it. They didn't know what was going on with it. And so David comes with all these men, and here they are. They're ready to celebrate. And they say, we need to put this on a new cart. Now, if you recall, when we looked at the Ark of the Covenant, remember it had 2 poles. And those poles were not to be removed, ever. Even when that ark was sitting in the temple, those poles were still on it. Because no one was allowed to touch that ark. So, if you recall, you shall put the poles into the rings and the sides of the ark, that the ark may be carried by them. Who is them? The Levites. The Levites were in charge of the ark. Okay? Now, in Numbers 4, we get this little hint. It says, and when Aaron and his sons have finished covering the sanctuary and all the furnishings of the sanctuary, when the camp is set to go, then the sons of Kohath, which was a son of Aaron, so the sons of Kohath shall come to carry them, but they shall not touch any holy thing, lest they die. God had just made a promise. Did he not? He made a promise to the Israelites, do not touch any holy thing. Nothing was more holy than the Ark of the Covenant. And so they were not to touch it, they were to pick it up by the poles. Now, God also provided special provisions for the Levites and specific directions to the tribe of Kohath. And we find this in Numbers 7. Then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, accept these from them. Now what he's talking about is they were getting ready to take care of the tabernacle, build the tabernacle, and so people were bringing gifts in to the Lord at Moses' request, but people were bringing in free will gifts, and they brought certain things to give to Moses and to give to the Lord. So, accept these from them. What are these things? That they may be used in the doing the work of the tabernacle of meeting. And you shall give them to the Levites, to every man according to his service. So Moses took the carts, they gave them carts, and the oxen, and he gave them to the Levites. 2 carts and 4 oxen he gave to the sons of Gershon, according to their service. And 4 carts and 8 oxen he gave to the sons of Moriah, according to their service, under the authority of Ithamar, the son of Aaron, the priest. So these certain groups of Levites now have these carts and oxen. But to the sons of Kohath, He gave none. Because theirs was the service of the holy things, which they carried on their shoulders. How should the ark be carried? By the poles on your shoulders, not in an old cart, not in a purple cart, not in a used cart, not in an old cart. It was to be carried on the shoulders. So why would they place the ark on a cart? Well, let's think about that. That's the way it had come to them. It was on a cart. God must have changed the rules a little bit. Must have been okay for the cart to carry the ark. Must have lightened the burden. Why carry it on our shoulders? It'd be a lot easier just to put it on a cart. How much faster could we go if we had oxen pulling the cart? Boy, we could get that back to Jerusalem in a hurry. You know, after all, the Philistines did it. Worked for them. They didn't even have anybody driving the cart, and it made it right to where it needed to go. That seems like a pretty good idea. Surely it's okay if God's people do the same thing. Perhaps the designated tribe assigned to carry the ark, did we hear any mention of them? We just had 30,000 men who came that were select, the best men that David had. And then the two people that were in the house where it had been kept said, they can drive the ark. You know, we don't need those Levites. We don't need the Kohaths. After all, by the time they got up here and then we waited for them, we could already have this cart and the ark in Jerusalem. Why do we need to wait? You know, this would have been a great time for Uzzah and Ahio and Abinadab to speak up to the king. Now, we don't know if they knew the law. They may not have any idea. They weren't priests. They weren't Levites. They may not have any idea. They may think a cart was just fine. They may not have even thought about it touching it. Now, it had been in their house for a few days. They'd been around it. Maybe they knew not to touch it and didn't want to touch it. But because it had been in their midst, what happens when we get around something and we are there all the time? We get curious. We also get, there's the ark. I walked by it yesterday. I walked by it again today. I walked by it 3 or 4 days ago. You get complacent too. It's just the ark. It's not doing anything special. It's just sitting on an old cart. So we're going to transfer it, pick it up by the poles, and put it on a new cart. But would it have not been a great time for Uzzah or Ahio or Abinadab to say, wait a minute, David, shouldn't the Levites, shouldn't the sons of Kohath come and get this ark? Now they could claim, well, we didn't know that. But does God say you don't need to listen to the law? They were required to come to the temple every year and listen to the law of Moses be read. So they should have heard this. So not knowing, of course, is no excuse. Now, if God had not struck Uzzah, then God would have broken his promise. God would be a liar. He said if you touched it, you would die. Now, there's a good chance that the Philistines touched it. But did God give that law to the Philistines? No, he didn't. He gave it to his people. If God didn't strike him dead, then what other things in the Bible would he not continue as he promised? What he said would happen has happened, which gives us the assurance that what has not happened will happen. That's why we read God's Word, to tell us what's going to happen. And to hear what did happen and see how God kept His promises, regardless of the circumstances. But I think there's one other message here. What if Uzzah had all kinds of good intentions, just out of quick reaction, just reached up there, oh, I got to catch the card. No ulterior motives, pure in heart, just touched it. He still did something that God said, do not do. Number one, if God needed his help, he wouldn't have given that rule. God didn't need his help. But he thought God did. Oh, I don't have enough faith in God that thing's not going to fall off the card. I am going to keep it from falling off. And it could have just been that reaction. You see it falling, boom. I need to keep that from tipping over. So it tells us that no matter our good intentions, how pure and motivated we are to do things for God, they all fall short. You can say, well, if you broke the laws, then you know you fell short. You sinned. But what do you say? I didn't sin, God. I was reading my Bible every day. I helped the poor. I gave my tithes. I did everything that you required. God, why? Why is this happening to me? Because today we are in a society that expects things. Right? What do we call it? A society of what? Entitlement. Exactly. We're entitled to this. We're entitled to God's love. We're entitled to His riches. We think we are entitled. But God was very specific when Adam sinned. What did He tell Adam he deserved? He would die. You see, we think we're entitled to a lot of things, but if we do not accept Christ and believe in that, we're entitled to one thing and only one thing, and it isn't taxes. What is it? Death. That is the only thing we're entitled to. We're entitled to exactly what Uzzah received. Death. And that's what makes the Old Testament so important for us to understand. It shows us how much sin is deplored by God. We have no possibility, as good as we think we could be, to even get close to even looking at, to thinking about heaven. All because God said He loved us, and He said, I'm going to give you a way out, and my grace will be sufficient to cover that. And it's the only way it will be covered. There is no other choice. But yet, in today's time, because there's so many entitlement things that we see, we're entitled to light, we're entitled to electricity, we're entitled to fill up our car with gas at the store. We're entitled to a paycheck. We're entitled to so many things that the world around us makes us feel that way. The world affects us just like the world affected David when he said, just put it on a cart. Philistines did it. It'll work for us too. God said, I didn't tell you to do that. You see, later on, when this happened, David said, we don't want the ark. We'll just set it over here to the side. We'll put it over here. And you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go back. I'm going to ask the priests what we need to do. I'm going to get some advice. And they told him. And so David, again, prepared. But he prepared the way God had asked him to do it. And he went back and had the sons of Kohath pick up the ark and begin to bring it back to Jerusalem, to the city of David. So maybe God was mad at himself. Yeah, God, I'm mad at you, but because you didn't take it out on me. You took it out on Uzzah. Boy, to come to that realization that caused a man's death. Because if David hadn't have given the instructions to do all that, that would not have happened. Of course, we know later on in life, David does that again in a different format, in a different way. But God said that David is still a man after God's heart. It tells us that His grace is sufficient. No matter what we've done, no matter how bad we think we are, God has sufficient grace. Matter of fact, Paul tells us that the grace becomes more abundant and is shown even more the weaker we are. Because He can fill us to overcome that. But our desire has to be to follow the rules He has in place. And we can't know the rules if we don't read the rule book. Proverbs tells us this: trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge Him, and He shall direct your paths. Do not be wise in your own eyes. Fear the Lord and depart from evil. Get away from it. We're called to be salt and light to the world, but we're not called to indulge in the things that the world does. And it's getting harder and harder to do that. And Jesus explained that that's exactly what it would be like. That in the end times, it's going to be harder and harder for you, as a Christian, to participate in the society of the earth. And it's going to get a lot harder. It is extremely hard in areas in the Middle East and Northern Africa, Central Africa. Christians are being killed only because they said, I believe in Jesus. We haven't faced that yet. We still live in our bubble. But it'll come someday. Isaiah tells us this: for my thoughts are not your thoughts, the Lord says. No, nor are your ways my ways. For as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, my thoughts than your thoughts. Even our best thoughts are not holy enough to even float up to heaven if they don't float through Jesus Christ. They're just meaningless. Then Paul tells the Ephesians, he says, for by grace you have been saved through faith, that not of yourselves, not because you pushed the ark back up on the cart. It is a gift of God, not of works, lest anyone should boast. Uzzah didn't even have a chance to boast. And neither should we. It is going to get tougher. We see in the newspapers right now, I read an article just yesterday, an opinion piece in the New York Times said, we as a nation have got to mandate vaccination records. And everyone needs to show that vaccination record. You see, it may not be our governmental laws that force us to do that. It may be our ability to just participate in society. That's what he said the end times are going to be like. But he also promised us that he'd take his church out of here. I think that's going to happen before all of that is required. But then I think about, well, that's us in the United States in our bubble. That's not what's happening in northern Africa. Those people are right now losing their life because they can't participate in society. So we be prepared, and we do the things that God asks us to do because we love Him. We support people like Jeffrey. We help our fellow neighbors. We encourage people, but we've got to do the one thing that He asks us to do. Share our faith with other people. And I'm just telling you, that's the hardest thing there is to do. It's easy to write a check. It's easy to put money in the offering plate. It's easy to come to church and worship with all the like-minded people. But when you step out of that door and you drive down that highway and you get out of your car, man, it's tough to go to that next door neighbor. It's tough to go knock on that door across the hall. It's tough to talk to your sons and your daughters, your cousins, your aunts, your uncles. Man, it's tough. But that's what He asks us to do. So not to close on a bad thought. We can do this. You know why we can do this? Because of the Holy Spirit. We've accepted Him into our lives, into our heart, and He will give us the power, the opportunity, and the words to say. But we still have to be prepared. That's why we come here, to prepare ourselves. Because I want to tell you, I can remember somebody asking me this years ago. Well, God killed a guy for doing something good. I went, oh, yeah, I did. I didn't know what to say. But now I do, and now you do. And so you can share that. And we are to be prepared. Peter says, be prepared. And we will be. So let's close with